Human rights, human rights. Countries.
Human rights, human rights. Human rights, human rights comes
Human rights.
human countries, human rights. China. Countries comes
Rights, human rights.
Human rights, human rights, human rights, rights, human rights, human rights,
human rights, human rights, human rights, human rights.
Human rights, human rights, human rights,
Cuba.
human rights, rights.
countries,
Countries. Because
Countries.
countries comes
Countries.
human rights, egregious human rights.
Human rights.
Comes countries, human rights. Comes
Human rights.
countries,
Countries comes council.
countries, human rights,
Countries,
human rights, comes
human rights, rights, human rights, rights,
human rights, comes rights, comes countries, contributing
Human rights, countries.
countries, comes
human rights,
countries, countries,
human rights,
comes human rights, comes
Human rights, human rights, human
countries, human rights,
human rights,
Thank you very much. Comes countries, comes Yemen,
Human rights.
comes
human rights, human rights, human rights, human rights, countries,
comes countries,
Yemen.
comes countries, human rights,
Human rights.
comes
Countries.
comes countries,
Human rights, human rights, human rights.
comes rights,
Human rights, human rights, human rights.
countries, comes countries,
countries,
countries, comes
countries,
countries,